right. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Wildlife Facts Fast. We are very excited today for this topic. This morning, I woke up listening to the rain pour on my roof, and I was really excited and just absolutely loved it, laying there listening to it. And I went out at lunch, and we have just over half an inch of rain outside of Santa Fe, and it made me really happy for monsoon season to be here. But it's kind of interesting. You know, a week ago, it was pretty hot across New Mexico. It was in the 90s up here in Santa Fe, and I'm sure down there in Cruces, it was over 100. So, Jeremy, do you want to talk to us and tell us about what wildlife do in the heat?
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. My name is Jeremy Lane. I'm a public information specialist based in Las Cruces for the Department of Game and Fish. When it's hot, you or I might get a cold drink or turn down the thermostat or turn up the swamp cooler. But how do our animals deal with the heat? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Ways an animals can deal with heat, they can all be kind of lumped under this larger umbrella of what we call thermoregulation. That's your first 50-cent word of the day. And that means maintaining body temperature within certain limits. What's right for you as a species. So let's start with big ears. Big ears are common in desert species because they help dissipate heat. What do we mean by that? Well, ears are highly vascularized. That means they've got a lot of blood vessels. You can actually see some of the veins in that mule deer's ears. And when the surrounding temperature, the outside temperature, is a little bit lower than the animal's inside body temperature, the blood vessels in these ears can widen, they can expand. And this is called vasodilation. This results in more blood being circulated through the ears, and the thinner, wider surface there helps to cool it off by coming into contact with the cooler outside air. A little heat exchange there. It's called convective cooling. What are some other ways? Well, let's see. Well, the thick winter coat is making you hot. You take it off. Animals do too. Shed it. Get rid of it. A lot of animals grow a thicker coat for winter months because it's needed then to stay warm, but they aren't needed come spring and summer in New Mexico, that's for sure. So they shed it. It leaves them looking a little bit rough during the process, however. If you're wondering, the scientific term for shedding is called molting, as this coyote is doing there, looking a little haggard. You might have thought molting only applies to birds, but it applies to mammals too. And it can leave them a little uncomfortable and itchy in the process for sure. One thing you might think of when you think about being really hot is sweating. Sweating works by evaporative cooling. It's one of our body's ways of cooling ourselves off. So you see, water needs to absorb heat to change from a liquid to a vapor. So as the water evaporates off our skin, it's taking some heat with it, and that's why we feel cool afterwards. Only mammals can sweat though. Only mammals have sweat glands. And some mammals don't sweat enough to actually cool themselves off, but they do sweat a little bit. For instance, dog family, like our wolves and our coyotes, they do sweat a little bit at their paws, but not enough to cool them off. Well, what do you do when you can't sweat or you can't sweat enough to be efficient about it? Well, one way is to lick yourself, to take advantage again of evaporative cooling. You put that moisture on your fur, it evaporates off and it leaves it cooler than it was to begin with. So cat family are super famous for this, right? Our mountain lions and our bobcat, as you see there, they'll bathe themselves to take advantage of this. Bathing can also be hygienic grooming for cats, and it's also a social interaction when they groom each other. If tongue baths aren't your thing, some animals will pant. You've probably seen your dog, if you've had a dog in your life at some point, panting, and the dog family does that too. Like our wolves and our coyotes. What's panting doing? As cooler air passes over the wet mouth and the nasal passages there, the throat and the lungs, cooler air is being taken in, and it's cooling off the animal, and it's also doing that evaporative cooling yet again. Panting can also be a sign of contentment or happiness in the dog family. Well, some reptiles can pant, not all of them, but even the ones that can't can still take advantage of evaporative cooling by doing what's called gaping. And gaping is simple, it's just holding your mouth open And again, exposing those wet surfaces of your respiratory system to cooler outside air in the hopes of cooling yourself off through some evaporative cooling, maybe some convective cooling too. Some birds get a little fancier with it. Some nighthawks, like you see there, or some doves, have what's called a gular sac in their throat, kind of a white part on that bird there. And they can do what's called gular fluttering. So what they do is they vibrate, expand, and contract that gular sac at their throat rapidly, and it's panting. It's bringing air in and out, and it's cooling off the vascularized tissue inside that bird's gular sac. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But it's essentially just fancy panting. We call it something different in the birds that have that gular sac. Another way that New Mexico wildlife thermoregulates is simply by moving to shade. Just get someplace cooler, right? Go sit under an umbrella or a tree. For us, animals are the same way. There you see a pronghorn in some shade and a coach whip in some shade. You might go down a burrow, but moving to another area can be done on a much larger scale too, right? To cope with the heat, you could just leave the area. Where it's available, animals might move to higher elevations, like elk might move to higher ranges at the warmer part of the day or the warmer part of the year. And that's just to get cooler, get some lower temperatures at those higher elevations. If you leave your home range completely for like a different seasonal home range, of course, that's called migration. Birds are famous for it, right? One bird that we've actually talked about on Wildlife Facts Fast before is the Swainson's hawk that you see there. We have Swainson's hawk over a large portion of North America. That's the peach kind of orange color you see there on the map. They spend their winters in South America, down there on the yellow and blue section of that map. And then when stuff gets too hot for them in South America, they come back to North America. So they make a really big migration. And there's bird species that even top that for sure. But yeah, birds are known for migrating. How about instead of migrating, you could just change the times of the day that you're active. We do that. We walk our dogs earlier in the morning or later in the evening to avoid those extreme temperatures. And animals are the same way. Take a look at this little figure I made up here. And we're going to talk about different times of activity patterns. So if you're active mostly at night, that's the blue line, you call that being nocturnal. Most people know that one. If you're active at dawn and dusk in the twilight hours, that's called being crepuscular. You can see there's two spikes of activity in the orange line at the bottom there. If you're active only during the daytime, while it's nice and light out, you can see your predators and that kind of thing, you can see your prey. That's called being diurnal. And animals don't have to stick with one. So for instance, take a rock rattlesnake there, okay? It might start off its activity season in spring being diurnal. You'll see them out midday because it's not too warm yet. And then as spring drags on and becomes summer and it gets really hot, they might shift their activity pattern to become crepuscular. So you only see them at dawn and at dusk because it's just too hot otherwise. And then if things get even hotter as August pushes on and gets really hot, they might shift to being completely nocturnal. A lot of snakes do that, in fact. If you can find it, taking a dip in some water really helps with the heat, of course, right? In the swimming pool, calling your name on some hot summer days. Animals will come into towns, into cities, into yards for the same reason. When water is scarce and temperatures are high, they might come into our areas, our home ranges, to look for that water. So this is a really good reminder to view your property from the perspective of an animal that could be looking for food, water, and cover and shelter. Because instead of a blue grosbeak, like that little bird there that might be attractive to you, it could get this guy. Wouldn't be a Wildlife Facts Fast if we didn't talk about black bear. And there you go. What about when water is not available? Mud works in a pinch. Yeah, you might when you're hunting, you might see animals covered in dried mud, and that's because they're using it to cool off. Not only does it cool off the animal, but it also provides a little bit of sun protection from those rays beating down on it. And it also gives a little bit of relief from those pestering, biting insects that fly around and buzz your head. So mud's a pretty good alternative. Lastly, one thing that you shouldn't try to cool off is urinating on your feet. Yep, you heard it here first. Yeah, turkey vultures will do this. It's called urohydrosis, and it lowers the temperature of their blood vessels in their feet through our trusted friend evaporative cooling. So that might be one you want to leave off your list this summer. But I guess with that in mind, I probably should have made the turkey vulture number 1 on the list. But that's it for another installment of Wildlife Facts Fast. I'll keep being Jeremy Lane, and I hope you all stay cool.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.